You are now dialed into Investment Research Radio. All material on this program is not to be taken as investment advice and is for informational purposes only. Investment Research Radio interviews the most exciting up-and-coming companies, as well as market commentary from leading analysts and traders. Now with your host, Ray Crowley.
Welcome to Investment Research Radio. I'm your host, Ray Crowley. Today we have Cooper Quinn, President and Director of Osprey Gold, OS on the TSXV. Thank you so much for coming on, Cooper.
Thanks for having me, Ray.
So you guys have a company, Vancouver-based company, with some properties over in Nova Scotia. And you guys have been working hard over there the last little while. Fairly new company. Could you just tell us a bit about the beginnings of Osprey and where you've kind of come from there?
Yeah, for sure. We are relatively new. The company kind of launched publicly in January of 2017. Really, it started in at PDAC in Toronto in 2016. So, there was some legwork involved into getting to that stage. And kind of what happened was there was a group of people that were starting to put together a management team and look for some projects and had a shell. And I had some experience with some of those existing directors, Adrian Fleming being a key player in it all. He and I were involved in a company called Undervalued Resources back in 2007 to 2010, which ultimately sold to Kinross Gold for, I think, about $139 million. So. Nice. And those assets are now contained within a company called White Gold Corp, which is worth taking a look at. But so it started there, and we were looking for projects, and we kind of knew we wanted something in a politically safe jurisdiction and an operationally safe jurisdiction, and looked at some stuff in the U.S. and really started to look at some stuff in Canada, and came across some assets out in Nova Scotia, and kind of started to look at the district a little more. Wasn't too familiar with it, in depth, and it started to look really interesting, and the things we liked about it really were that it seemed fairly underexplored. There was gold mines all across the province, and there was a significant amount of existing infrastructure. So ultimately, those first assets that we looked at, we did not end up acquiring, but through the course of starting to look around out there, we came across 4 assets that we did like even more. And so we picked up an option on those, and that was the first agreement we signed and launched the company within January there. So those assets included kind of our flagship asset of Goldenville, which after acquisition we put together a resource of about 447,000 ounces at just under 5 grams on, based on historic drilling. We subsequently have done some more drilling on that project. I think expanded on that resource, although we haven't done any resource report, and made one pretty key, I think, exploration discovery at that project last year. Towards the end of 2017, we picked up a 5th project called Cariboo. And I guess I should mention as well, all of these projects that we've picked up are past producers. Nova Scotia had a pretty extensive gold production period from around 1850, 1860 to generally most of them shut down in 1942. And that was key for us as well, looking at, as I mentioned, these mines kind of all over the province, but that most of them shut down during World War II, and that wasn't due to a lack of resources or reserves. That was obviously due to the war and manpower shortages and kind of a focus on industrial minerals and stuff like that. And most of them never really got back off the ground at that point in time. Cariboo being one of the exceptions to that, where it operated a couple of times briefly beyond that. But all of these were traditionally kind of high-grade underground deposits. So we picked up Cariboo at the end of last year. That's where we've been focusing most of our efforts this year. We think we've got the next steps planned out at Goldenville, and kind of wanted to put some horsepower behind Cariboo this year. So we've got the first round of results out from that program about a month and a half ago, and be looking to put some new results out here fairly soon. What we've done so far there this year is we've been focusing on looking for this disseminated style of mineralization in the province. As I mentioned, these deposits were historically mined, but that was generally as high-grade underground deposits. They're very kind of typical gold in quartz vein style deposits. You know, when you think of that old underground miner back in at the turn of the century, that's pretty much what these were. So they were very high-grade operations, anywhere from maybe 10 grams or a third of an ounce up to average grades at Goldenville were just shy of half an ounce. So significantly high grade. But beyond that, and what we've been looking for at Goldenville and as well as at Cariboo, is this disseminated halo of mineralization outside of those veins. This isn't a new discovery of mineralization per se. It's been known in the province since around 1900 or so, but it's, in 1900, these anywhere from half a gram to a gram and a half in these big, large disseminated halos didn't mean anything to you. It wasn't economically viable, whereas now with open pit mining techniques, that is. And there's a company that is doing that quite well that happens to be our neighbor there in Atlantic Gold. And so they're looking at ramping production up here. They started this will be their first year of commercial production, and I think they're running somewhere around 1.2, 1.3 grams per ton. So,
and they've been
a drastically different paradigm than the previous mining.
So they've been able to really prove out that there's the open pit feasibility in Nova Scotia, and I guess they've really been quite a success story.
Yeah, I think we started paying attention. They were fairly new to me when we first started looking around Nova Scotia. I think they were trading around 30 cents at the time, and we're kind of just headed into the beginning of their actual construction and development. They managed to permit, construct, and go run through development and ramp up and everything into commercial production on time and on budget, which is, I think, a testament to two things. Number one would be the team that they have behind that asset there, and number two is the province, and it speaks to the existing infrastructure, nearby deepwater ports, and the workforce that's in the province there. So that was very well done on their part, and now they're trading, I think, around $1.60 or so. So that's been a great success for a lot of investors, certainly, as well. And keeping a keen eye on their story and wishing them the best. Cariboo is located fairly strategically to their Moose River Consolidated plant. It's about 8 kilometers up on the road from there. And as you mentioned, they're kind of one of the keys that they've used to unlock these open pits is this disseminated style of mineralization. And, they're certainly not turning away any of the high-grade veins that are contained within there. But, it's kind of a similar story to what we've been looking to put together at some of our projects. I think we've had some pretty good proof of concept success on that at surface at Cariboo, as well as with some of the drilling at Goldenville last year. And in the near future here, we'll be releasing results from some historic core that we rehabilitated and sampled at Cariboo. And what that was through some of the earlier exploration programs in the late 80s, these projects were drilled. It was kind of during the flow-through era. So some of them were drilled fairly extensively, but the only thing that was sampled was that vein material. So we've gone back and sampled in between all of those veins, looking for this disseminated style of mineralization.
That's great. Everyone wants to know about a company that's drilling and has potential results to come up. Wondering if you could just give us a bit of a snapshot on what you have for projects, all in all.
Yeah, for sure. So as I mentioned there, we've got kind of 2 agreements right now. So the initial 4 properties that we picked up were Goldenville, Lower Seal Harbor, Gold Lake, and Miller Lake. Goldenville is kind of the big flagship there. That is where we have this existing resource of about 447,000 ounces. It was the largest historic producer in Nova Scotia from that period, from about 1850 to 1942. And we think that resource has significant room to grow. Lower Seal Harbor, Gold Lake, and Miller Lake are all a little bit earlier stage projects, i.e. they don't have any resources. They have less exploration performed on them since the mines shut down and stuff, but we think they're all very viable targets and good projects to have. And we've done some exploration work at all 3 of those, but as I said, they're earlier stage at this point in time. And then Cariboo would be the other project that we picked up at the end of last year there. It has a historic resource from 2008, I believe, of just under 100,000 ounces on it. And it's, I think, interesting for a variety of reasons, one of which is the potential for this disseminated mineralization, but as well it holds several other different styles of mineralization that aren't quite typical of what you see within the rest of the Maguma terrain, which hosts most of these gold deposits. And there's these large stockwork zones with 10 meters plus or minus of 10 gram intercepts, so these kind of 100 gram meter intercepts that would be potentially viable for bulk underground mining as well. We believe there's disseminated mineralization on the property, and then there is some of the kind of more typical vein-hosted style Maguma mineralization that was historically mined on the project. So kind of a bunch of different avenues there to explore that we like. And so that gives us kind of this portfolio of 5 projects across the province, but all within relatively easy driving and trucking distance.
Mitchell Lake, is that in Cariboo?
It is not. So Mitchell Lake is, it's a little bit confusing from a naming perspective because we have Miller Lake and Mitchell Lake. So Miller Lake would be a separate property. Mitchell Lake is about 3.5 kilometers to the west of our Goldenville main zone resource there. At Mitchell Lake last year, why that's important is we drilled 3 holes there, and the first one of which hit, I have to refresh my memory exactly, but it was about 30 meters of just under a gram. And that was key for us. That was this truly disseminated style of mineralization at Mitchell Lake, which is exactly what we were looking for in the first hole. So I think that was an important discovery for us last year. That would be, another place where we can start to build a resource near the Goldenville resource. And I think the other kind of paradigm shift that Atlantic is showing beyond the change from historic high-grade underground vein mining is this shift to multiple deposits. And some of the detractors for Nova Scotia throughout the past 40 years have always said that these deposits are kind of too small. But ultimately, what that means for me is that there's a lot more kind of 3, 4, 5, 6, 700,000 ounce deposits out there than there are 2, 3, 4 million ounce deposits in the world. And if we can put together a package of 2, 3, or 4 of these 500,000 or 600,000 ounce deposits, we can build a portfolio that's well over 1 million ounces or even more. And because of the infrastructure that's here in place, put that into a central mine plan, and that's exactly what Atlantic has done with their Moose River Consolidated. So
it definitely makes it a lot more attractive being in Nova Scotia. I mean, there's roads all over the place, easy access to just about anything you need. So
yeah, and I think of it as kind of like what makes a successful discovery. And if you're in, I don't know, somewhere in the far north, you might need a 2 million ounce discovery or 2 million ounce hole in the ground to be able to make that a economically viable mining project. Where here in Nova Scotia, we can combine several of these smaller deposits into one mine plan and make it viable. And in theory, these smaller deposits, there should be more of them. They seem to be well concentrated in this district in Nova Scotia, and ultimately that is hopefully an easier path to a similar production profile.
So I guess it would be fair to say that a part of the vision for Osprey would to have multiple open pit mines within fairly close radius.
Yeah, I mean that's what we're focused on exploring for is near surface potentially open pit mineable mineralization in Nova Scotia here. We have that in our resource at Goldenville. I think we took a good big step towards that at Mitchell Lake last year with the drilling there, and now trying to advance Cariboo to that stage as well. It has this existing historic resource on it, but looking for that near surface disseminated mineralization has been our focus this year there. And so that's 3 of these projects that I think have 3 of these areas and zones that have the potential to host very significant near-surface, open-pittable mineralization. And yeah, that's kind of our story at this point in time. And like I said, the neighbors with Atlantic have really demonstrated that this is a potentially viable technique.
Yeah, one thing I like about your company is that you guys have a great, reputable management team. You've got proven resources, and you've got you've been able to raise money to get things done, and you're not, to me, you're not promoting it like a lot of these other companies you might see. They don't really have much, but they're just running a company and just living a lifestyle company, and this happens a lot. But I really think that you guys have a good shot at really making something of this, and I just want to applaud you and your team.
Well, thanks. I think ultimately that comes down to the fact that by trade and training, I'm originally a geologist, and where we feel we can build the most value in the ground, especially in tough markets like this, is out there doing exploration with boots and shovels and drills in the ground, because that's where we can actually build wealth and build value, is through discovery. And so that's what we work hard at. And like I said, as a geologist, the more dollars I can put into the ground, especially the happier I am.
No, that's good. I know it's been a tough go for a lot of miners, especially in the metals sector. It's been tough. It's been selling off, but I call myself a reformed gold bug. I used to be very focused on gold, but now I've opened up to a lot of other things. But one thing that I continue to focus on is the gold market, and I'm feeling very optimistic, and I think there's some absolute steals out there that people could scoop up at very discounted prices. I think that your company is probably one of the most undervalued mining companies on the market, and I really have been watching it closely.
Well, thanks, Ray. It's been a tough market out there for the metals lately. We had some other notable successes in other sectors throughout the year. Not so much in crypto this year, but then certainly in the cannabis sector. And what I think that's doing as well is there's a fair number of people who made a fair amount of money in those other sectors. They
Definitely
might be traditionally mining investors, and so they do hold some of these things. What that means is they're probably looking to offset some of those gains with some tax loss selling. But people should look at this as hopefully a buying opportunity, and we'll rebound in the new year, I would hope. And the other thing I think is worth noting is that the market is reacting in some specific cases to good results, and that's telling us that the market's not completely dead out there. It is paying attention, it is working. It's just it has a very short attention span at this point in time, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Just was wondering if you could tell us a bit. One thing that I was just learning about was overburden and strip ratios. I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about what that is with respect to open pit mining.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a very complex subject, but it comes down to is a ton of rock worth more to pull out of the ground and run through the mill than it is to not do that. And so you have waste and you have ore. Ore goes through the mill and waste doesn't. And your strip ratio is ultimately the ratio of that waste rock to ore rock. You still have to cover, you still cost money to remove that waste rock to access that ore. So at a certain point, you're removing so much waste rock to get to the ore that it's no longer particularly viable. In Nova Scotia, if we look at Atlantic, they're, I believe, running a strip ratio right now of somewhere around 1-to-1, i.e. they're pulling out 1 ton of waste rock for every 1 ton of ore they're removing. I think their overall plan bumps up to somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.2-to-1, so 2.2 tons of waste to every 1 ton of ore. But that's kind of what ultimately constrains the size of your open pit and the depth of your open pit. And so that's why these broad disseminated ore bodies are a little bit more amenable to open pit mining than narrow vein deposits, because your ore is more broadly distributed. And if you look at that on a cost, why would you want to do that via open pit versus underground mining or something like that? You're looking at probably a cost difference between mining 1 ton of underground ore is probably 10 to 15 times what it costs to pull out a ton of open pit ore. So you can do those much lower grade mining with those open pits. You just end up being a little bit less selective and mining more waste, but since it's much cheaper, it balances out.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for coming on. We're looking forward to those drill results coming up, and we'll have to have you on here again sometime.
Yeah, me too, Ray. And thanks. Yeah, I'd love to chat with you, keep people updated on the story, and yourself as well. And so look forward to the next time we have had a chance to catch up. And yeah, it's an interesting time of year, I think, for investors. Given just the market cycles and everything, this tends to be a bit of a low in the year. And so we'll see what happens over the next couple of months here.
I'm feeling optimistic.
Myself as well.
Okay.
Thanks, Ray.
Right,
we'll talk
care.
to you soon.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you for tuning into Investment Research Radio. Don't forget to sign up for the regular show and stay informed at investmentresearchradio.com.